There's something quietly rebellious about silence. In a world where every moment is broadcasted, every coffee cup, every sunrise, every smile, there are still people who choose not to be seen. They scroll, they observe, they feel everything, yet they post nothing. And maybe you've noticed them, the friends whose profiles haven't changed in years, the ones who never share their vacations, their meals, or their thoughts. You might think they've disappeared, but what if they've actually found something the rest of us lost? See, we live in an age that worships visibility. To exist is to be seen. To matter is to be noticed. But what if the loudest proof of existence isn't in being watched? It's in watching quietly. Because silence in this digital age isn't emptiness, it's resistance, it's control. It's the decision to live moments for yourself instead of for an audience. So tonight, let's step into that silence together, into the minds of those who've chosen invisibility. Not because they have nothing to say, but because they've finally realized the truest parts of life don't need witnesses. One, the psychology of silence. What's really going on inside? Silence isn't a lack of expression. It's a form of understanding. Psychologists say there's more happening behind the quiet than most people ever realize. Because when someone chooses not to post, it's rarely about shyness. It's about sovereignty, the quiet ownership of one's inner world. Some people stay off social media because they've learned to regulate themselves. They notice how the scroll makes their pulse quicken, how comparison sneaks in like smoke through a half-open door. So they step back, not out of fear, but out of wisdom. That's self-regulation, the ability to protect your peace before your peace is stolen. Others are searching for something more sacred, authenticity. They've grown tired of performing happiness, of turning real life into highlight reels. They crave moments that don't need an audience, mornings without filters, laughter without captions. They're not avoiding connection, they're rebuilding it, one genuine moment at a time. And then there are those who practice what I call emotional minimalism. They curate not their feeds, but their feelings, choosing simplicity over stimulation. They understand that constant exposure dilutes experience, that sometimes silence is the only space where meaning can breathe. These people haven't disappeared. They're simply moving differently. Slower, deeper, more deliberately. They've traded validation for presence, noise for nuance. And in doing so, they remind us that maybe the mind isn't meant to be online all the time. Because when the world gets too loud, silence isn't emptiness, it's a language. And those who speak it fluently understand something we've all forgotten, that peace isn't found in being seen, but in seeing yourself clearly again. 2. The addiction loop we've all been trained to love. Imagine this. Every time you post something online, you're pulling a lever on a slot machine. You wait, heart slightly racing, to see what comes back. A like, a comment, a heart. tiny digital rewards lighting up your brain with one simple message: you matter. It doesn't sound dangerous, but it's perfectly engineered. Neuroscientists have found that the same dopamine circuits triggered by gambling are also activated when you get social media engagement. Every like becomes a microdose of approval. Every scroll, a quiet search for the next hit. And slowly, invisibly, the platform starts training your brain to crave validation more than connection. That's why silence feels so uncomfortable for so many of us. We've been conditioned to measure our worth in metrics, in hearts, views, and numbers that fade as quickly as they appear. So when someone chooses not to post, they aren't rejecting technology. They're breaking the loop. It takes a different kind of discipline, the kind that can sit with stillness without needing applause. They've learned that meaning can't be quantified, and attention isn't affection. They've stepped out of the casino. And in that quiet, they begin to rediscover what dopamine once disguised: the slower, steadier reward of real presence. Because truthfully, the platforms don't want you fulfilled. They want you hooked. Hooked to the sound of your own echo. Hooked to the illusion that being seen equals being loved. But when someone walks away from that noise, something miraculous happens. The mind recalibrates. Colors look richer. Time slows down. Conversations feel whole again. That's not disinterest. That's recovery. They're not unplugging from the world. They're reconnecting with it, one unposted moment at a time. 3. The hidden cost of constant visibility. There's a quiet exhaustion that lives beneath the glow of every screen. We don't talk about it much. The pressure of always being on, always being seen. Psychologists call it self-presentational pressure, the awareness that eyes are always watching, even when they're not. It's subtle, but heavy, like carrying an invisible camera everywhere you go. You start performing without realizing it. Every smile becomes curated, every caption rehearsed. You're no longer living. You're producing a version of yourself for public consumption. And it's draining. Take Emily, for example. She was once the kind of person who shared everything: her morning runs, her travels, even her grief. At first it felt empowering, like connection. But over time, something shifted. Every post became a negotiation between who she was and who she thought people wanted her to be. The joy of the moment started shrinking under the weight of how it looked. Until one day, she stopped. No announcement, no explanation, just silence. And for the first time in years, she said she felt invisible and free. That's the paradox. Constant visibility doesn't make us feel seen, it makes us fragile. We start editing our existence, filtering our authenticity to stay likable, safe, acceptable. We trade truth for approval, depth for digestibility. It's a strange kind of loneliness, surrounded by eyes, yet starved for understanding. Because when everything becomes content, nothing feels sacred anymore. So maybe the ones who've chosen silence aren't hiding at all. Maybe they've just grown tired of being a brand. And in their quiet rebellion, they're reminding us of something we've forgotten: that being truly seen has nothing to do with being watched. 4.
when silence becomes self-protection. Sometimes silence isn't about mystery, it's about safety. There comes a point when sharing starts to feel like exposure, when the things you post stop belonging to you the moment they leave your hands. That's what psychologists call psychological ownership, the feeling that a thought, a memory, or a moment is yours. And when you broadcast it, that ownership fractures. What was once sacred becomes public property, open to judgment, distortion, and misunderstanding. For some people, the silence that follows isn't withdrawal, it's reclamation. They're reclaiming the right to feel something privately, to hold a sunset without photographing it, to cry without documenting it, to fall in love without turning it into proof. I once spoke to someone who said, "I stopped sharing because every time I posted something beautiful, it stopped feeling real." She wasn't bitter, just protective. Her quiet was a boundary, not a wall. In that light, silence becomes an act of emotional hygiene, a way of keeping your inner world clean from the fingerprints of strangers. It's not about secrecy, it's about sovereignty. Because when you've been misunderstood enough times, you learn that peace is not found in explanation, but in preservation. Silence, then, is not emptiness, it's self-respect. It's the art of knowing which parts of you deserve to stay untouched by algorithms and opinions. And in a world that constantly asks for more updates, more proof, more access, choosing to keep something just for yourself becomes a quiet revolution. 5. The freedom of being unseen. There's a kind of freedom that doesn't look dramatic. It doesn't come with applause or fireworks or a declaration. It arrives quietly, the moment you realize you don't need to be seen to exist. People who step away from constant posting often describe something subtle but profound. Colors feel warmer, time slows down, conversations last longer. They're no longer living life as an audience member of themselves. They've stopped performing and started participating. Psychologists call this an internal locus of control, the belief that your worth, your happiness, your direction come from within, not from external applause. It's the shift from, "Do they like me?" to, "Do I like who I'm becoming?" That's when silence transforms into serenity. Cooking without photographing it, traveling without tagging it, loving without announcing it. Each moment becomes whole again, not a highlight, but a heartbeat. There's philosophy in this too. The Stoics spoke of it centuries ago. The more you need to be seen, the less you see yourself. And maybe that's the quiet truth modern life forgot, that fulfillment isn't in visibility, but in alignment. When your private self and public self finally stop competing, peace begins. The unseen are not disconnected, they're unburdened. They're no longer tethered to perception. They're free to evolve without an audience, to make mistakes without a record, to feel deeply without translation. Because in the end, invisibility isn't erasure, it's emancipation. It's the freedom to live fully, imperfectly, and without permission.
6. The double-edged sword of silence. Silence can be beautiful, but like all beautiful things, it has a darker edge. Because not every silence is peace. Sometimes it's fear, the quiet of someone afraid to be misunderstood, rejected, or unseen for too long. For some, the retreat from social media isn't liberation, but self-protection born from pain. They've been mocked, ghosted, or simply ignored. Each post that once reached out for connection came back empty, or worse, came back cruel. So they learned to shrink, to disappear, to find comfort in invisibility. Psychologists call this avoidant self-presentation, when people withdraw not because they feel whole, but because they feel too exposed. Their silence becomes armor, not sanctuary. They scroll in shadows, aching to connect, but terrified of being seen. And this is where the line blurs between silence that heals and silence that hides. One grows from strength, the other from fear. Both look identical from the outside. It's easy to romanticize solitude, to say that stillness is always wisdom. But sometimes stillness is simply survival. The difference lies inside, in whether your quiet feels like peace or pressure. The path forward isn't to shame either one, because even silence born from pain is trying to protect something sacred, your sense of worth. And healing begins the moment you stop judging your quiet and start listening to it. Maybe the goal isn't to escape the world, but to re-enter it differently, to learn how to speak without performing, to share without surrendering yourself, to be visible without losing your soul.
7. Coming home to yourself. Maybe silence was never about disappearing. Maybe it's about returning. When the noise fades, the scrolling, the comparisons, the endless need to prove, something softer begins to surface. You start hearing your own thoughts again, unedited. You start noticing how sunlight feels different when you're not trying to capture it. You start realizing that your life has always been happening, even when no one was watching. Because real meaning doesn't need witnesses. Growth, heartbreak, forgiveness, transformation, they don't live on screens. They live quietly, inside you. And in that quiet, you rediscover what it means to belong to yourself. It's not loneliness. It's intimacy with your own being. It's the gentle understanding that your worth doesn't rise and fall with attention. It simply is, steady, constant, whole. So maybe the people who don't post aren't out of touch. Maybe they're the ones most in tune with life, with presence, with truth. They've remembered something we've all forgotten, that being unseen doesn't mean being alone, that sometimes the truest expression of love for the world, for yourself, is the decision to keep something entirely unshared. So take a breath. You don't have to perform. You don't have to prove. You're already here. And maybe tonight, instead of reaching for your phone, you reach inward, toward the quiet place where you still feel real. If this video resonated with you, share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear your perspective. Don't forget to subscribe to The Archetype for more deep dives into the hidden layers of the human psyche. Until next time, stay curious, stay conscious.